My name is Mick Jackson. I'm the originator, producer and director of Threads, which I shot 40 years ago in 1984. The film deals with very unsettling events. It's the events leading up to, passing through the outbreak of and the aftermath of a nuclear war, an exchange between the two superpowers, between East and West.
This time, they are playing with, at best, the destruction of life as we know it, and at worst, total annihilation. You cannot win a nuclear war!
And basically, through this period, it traces the fate of a small group of people in the city of Sheffield, right in the heart of Britain. You never really see any generals or politicians, just this group of ordinary people going through this. And that's what the movie is about. It's very explicit and very disturbing. In an odd and unsettling echo of today, the 1980s started with Russia invading a neighboring country. It was, in fact, Afghanistan. And it continued through there. The rhetoric between the East and West ramped up. The Russians shot down accidentally, they said, a Korean airliner full of passengers under the impression that it was an American spy plane. Reagan reacted by saying, this is an evil empire. The rhetoric just doubled and doubled and doubled. This is a period where the futurologists and strategists were actually starting to introduce the concept that you might be able to win a nuclear war, that you could prevail in a nuclear war. At that time, I was recently remarried, and my wife and I wanted to have kids. And we thought to ourselves, what the hell are we doing bringing kids into a world like this? Professionally, I was at the BBC as a senior producer, and I was helping to get off the ground a new series of programs called QED, Popular Science, half an hour at a time. And the idea I had was a guide to Armageddon. Let's do a kind of computer report, like a witch report on fallout shelters, nuclear shelters. How well do they work? What's good value for money? What do they protect you from? And so on. And obviously, if you're going to do this, you need to say, well, what do they need to protect us from? And so I had to deal with what a nuclear weapon does. Heat, a heat pulse, effects it has on your skin and on flammable things. Blast, the shock wave, what that does. And radiation, what the fallout does afterwards. Now, I decided I had to do this in a very powerful way, but not in an explicit way. So I came up with a number of analogues. For example, talking about the effect of flying glass.
As the pressure wave sweeps outwards from St. Paul's, it shatters and bursts every window in the city from the M4 services near Heathrow to Hornchurch in Essex, an area of 500 square miles.
I actually shot a flying glass at a pumpkin, and you could see it ripping the flesh off. Now, it doesn't take a lot to make the mental leap from that to what it was talking about. Anyway, the film was seen, and it's as scientific and as unpartisan as I could possibly make it. I had a citation for everything. I did a lot of research. And it went out, and lo and behold, people said, wow, we're glad to know that. Thank you for telling us. This is a really valuable contribution to the debate about nuclear weapons. But I'd done all this research. I'd spoken to, for that program, I'd spoken to agronomists, nuclear physicists, strategists, intelligence buffs, people who knew about climate, people who were investigative journalists. I had all this stuff in my head. And one of the things I had in my head that I hadn't been able to cover in that one program was, yes, heat, yes, blast, yes, radiation, and 4, trauma. What are the psychological effects of all this happening to you? You know, people had studied the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and found that they were almost incapable of functioning because of what they had been through. And I thought, somehow I have to deal with this psychological, this kind of threat of societal collapse that seemed to be happening. And I talked to someone like Robert J. Lifton, an amazing psychologist who had studied the survivors of Hiroshima, and all this work was bubbling up in me. I went to the BBC and said, look, I'm going to go and research this, but I think it needs a drama to get into people's emotions and emotional state. I'm going to propose taking a dramatist like Barry Hines, a very famous kind of screenwriter who'd written Kes and Looks and Smiles, and a really kitchen sink approach to drama, but who had this amazing empathy and somebody described him, Tony Garnett described him as an angry man with a kind and sweet nature inside him, who was really a champion of ordinary people. He had a deep empathy and commitment and passion to them. And he would take a group of people living in one place. He lived near Sheffield in a suburb called Hoyland, so I thought, well, Sheffield wouldn't be a bad place. I had this little silly line to myself, it's bang in the middle of Britain. It's an industrial centre, there's a NATO air base nearby, and it's a communication centre. So that would be a natural target. So I rehearsed in my head this scenario. I went off to talk to even more scientists and read more stuff, and Barry started writing, and I would feed stuff to him, and we'd write it into the screenplay. And we came up with this thing, which was Threads.
The government has taken control of British Airways and all cross-channel ferries. They say it's a temporary step to help move troops to Europe. Thousands are stranded at Heathrow and Gatwick. And the Royal Navy is to guard the North Sea oil rigs. The MOD says it's a prudent precautionary measure.
One of the principal things I consulted was this. It's called the effects of nuclear weapon. It's the main nuclear weapons, the main repository of everything that the Americans had learned in all these nuclear tests in the Nevada desert and Pacific atolls. Everything is in here. They even gave you, in the back cover of this book, a little kind of computer, a little plastic thing. You could turn the plastic things here, and it would tell you, you enter how many megatons or kilotons, you enter how far away you are, and it will tell you how big the fireball is, how deep the crater. Oh, yes, and how fast you'll be travelling if you're thrown against a wall. Will your eardrums rupture? Yes, they will. Will your skin burn? Yes. How deep? Look up. This thing contains everything that the laws of physics, the laws of nuclear weapons have. This was what I set against the families in Sheffield. This wasn't the voice of God. It wasn't an all-over view. You never saw any of that. You only saw these people trying to cope with this, with the radiation, with the blast, with the heat, the burns, everything.
Hanging in the atmosphere, the clouds of debris shut out the sun's heat and light. Across large areas of the northern hemisphere, it starts to get dark. It starts to get cold.
I came up with this strange structure of having a drama, but there is a voiceover occasionally coming in just to recite what I knew from my research, the laws of physics, what a nuclear weapon would do.
Even in Britain, within days of the attack, it could fall to freezing or below for long, dark periods.
Barry Hines loathed it, hated it. He said to me, we had a very tempestuous relationship as he was writing it, and I was working with him on the structure of it. He said, what does this have to do with a drama? I had never had this with Ken Loach. I never had to do this thing, Kes. And I said, no, that's what makes it different. That's what makes it work. It has to be studiously scientific, and that has to be the backbone of it. And it's almost sadistic, but you put these people through whatever the laws of nature say, whatever the laws of physics. You burn them, you throw them against things, and they have to cope with it. This is a way of telling the story. That turned out to be right.
We'll have to cut their rations. I've worked it out there. 1,000 calories for manual workers and 500 for the rest.
500? 500? That wouldn't keep a flea alive.
Should we be bothering to keep anybody alive if they can't work?
A lot of people are going to die anyway. It's back to survival of the fittest, I suppose.
They gave me a tiny budget. I had 17 days to shoot the end of the world, basically, in 2 hours, which prevented a kind of guerrilla warfare. The idea was, if you've never seen a nuclear weapon explode, if nuclear war is something so completely outside your experience as a human being, how do you think about it? What decisions do you make about who to support? If you don't have a vocabulary in your head for what it will do, how can you think about it? It's thinking the unthinkable. And I thought, well, I'm a scientist. I know how to read textbooks. I know how to read scientific papers. I have a visual imagination. In my spare time, I'm a painter. Let me give the public watching this a visual vocabulary, a series of images that once you see them, you can't get them out of your head. You can't unsee them. The camera work was amazing. Andrew Dunn, the cameraman, for one shot, tracking Ruth, this leading character, through the ruins, had to walk backwards through smoke and flames and over rubble, not knowing what he was getting because he couldn't see anything through the viewfinder. but knowing that it would be good and we could use it. The government announcements that you hear in this movie are real, and you may be familiar with them from watching Panorama when the bomb drops. Somebody got hold of these things, which were pre-recorded and pre-made, that were only to be used in the immediate run-up to a nuclear war. They're chilling.
If anyone dies while you are kept in your fallout room, move the body to another room in the house. Label the body with name and address, and cover it as tightly as possible in polythene, paper, sheets or blankets.
The narrator is saying in a very bland voice, if someone dies in your house, put them in a plastic sack and number it and name it and put it in a place in the garden and mark it with a stick. That's chilling. That's chilling.
If, however, you have had a body in the house for more than 5 days, and if it is safe to go outside, then you should bury the body for the time being in a trench or cover it with earth and mark the spot of the burial.
I had to make this film on a shoestring budget, and I had to use every trick in the book to shoot it like a documentary. If something was in the way, we had to be ingenious, cover it up, throw a tarpaulin over it, ship gravel or cement dust or something over it. The designer drove a Porsche and he opened up the back. He used to arrive on the set with sand shoveled into the back. So if anything didn't look was destroyed by the nuclear war, we'd shovel sand over it or gravel and throw rubble over it. Amazingly, for such a dark subject, everybody was on board. All the extras that we got in Sheffield, the cast, the crew, pulled out everything to make sure this worked. However hard it was to do and how difficult it was to do. Karen Ma went through the birth scene in the deserted barn with an Alsatian dog barking at her without any qualms at all. She has to bite through the umbilical cord. I'm giving away kind of spoilers here. We were near the Bassett's Licorice All Sorts factory in Sheffield, and they made us an umbilical cord out of licorice, and they covered it with goo and stuff. This is what you do when you have the passion to make a movie, but you don't have the money to make it. I used all kinds of shortcuts, bits of stock footage here and bits of stock footage there. Everybody on the set had a great time. This sounds terrible, but we did. We all knew that we were doing something which was very dark and very explicit and very terrible, and that kind of sense of purpose united everybody. So I hope when you see the movie, if you see it for the first time, you recognize that this is done with commitment and passion, but it's the passion that disguises itself as dispassion. That voice that tells you this is what Fallout is doing at this particular moment is a cool, cold voice. It has no commitment to those characters. It's just saying, this will happen. And you see that happening to these poor people. And it's horrifying, but because you want them to survive, you desperately want them to survive, you're with them, and you stick through really upsetting scenes because of that. The movie went out, I watched it go out on television, waited for the phone to ring. There's a kind of convention in the BBC that your colleagues support you. They give you a morale boost. When one of your programs or movies or whatever it is goes out, they call you up immediately afterwards and they either say, amazing, you really nailed it, that was amazing. Or they say, and it's kind of code word, well, you made some interesting, brave choices there, which is kind of code for it sucked. The phone didn't ring, and the phone didn't ring, and the phone didn't ring, and I just sat there totally dejected. I switched the set off. And it wasn't until the next morning that I was told that very few people who'd seen it went to bed that night. They just sat there in their chairs thinking about it, maybe afraid to go to sleep for those dreams that would come. Some people I know saw it as kids. They weren't supposed to see it. They were sent to bed and they peeked round doors and saw it as the thing which stayed with them until they were adult, and then they told other people. It gave people a way of thinking about the unthinkable, a way of reacting when someone says, oh, you can escalate in order to de-escalate. The other side will back off. Well, what if they don't? Well, you escalate them more. Every time a politician used that kind of language, they would think of the images in Threads. I think everybody's familiar by now with the iconic image of the traffic warden with bandages on his face and a machine gun over his shoulder, which is on the cover of Radio Times and all the publicity for the movie. People seem to my great surprise and bemusement, have latched onto this figure. I can see why, I think. You know, the holes cut in the bandages for the eyes, it's almost like a death's head. It's like a death's mask over the face. And you can't really see much except for the very grim set lips. It's like Freddy Krueger. It's like the villain in a horror movie. And a machine gun over his shoulder. It's a very menacing image, and I can see now why everybody went on this search to try and find the actor. The extra who played the traffic warden was a traffic warden, which was great, and it must have occurred to the producers, the assistant directors and so on. This was a man who comes with his own costume. It's the saving on the budget. Nuclear war in this movie, and I think it makes it clear, and I hope it makes it clear, is not a one-off event that then is over. In a nuclear war, it just goes on. There isn't any day after. There's the day after that, and it goes on and on and on. And if you'll see, watching this film, what that on looks like. And it's not particularly encouraging. If you watch this, there will be many things that make you uncomfortable, but they won't make you, I think, squirm. And they will help you understand what it is that you didn't know all these years. And hopefully, when you hear someone talking about a game of nuclear chicken, when you hear someone saying, we're going to release on you fire and fury like the world has never seen, you will remember some of these images from Threads, and that will give you pause and give you cause to hold people accountable and say, back off, back off. Because of Threads, I got to do a thing for Channel 4, not the BBC, called A Very British Coup, which was quite successful, and various people saw that. Gary Oldman saw it, and he said, would you like to direct me in this movie Chattahoochee? Which I said yes. It was my first feature, taken out of this realm of British broadcasting. Steve Martin's producer saw it and said, would you come and direct LA Story for Steve for us? Kevin Costner saw LA Story and said, would you come and direct The Bodyguard with Whitney Houston and me? I mean, that's putting it very simply, but it was a kind of rolling thing, one damn thing after another. I never expected to happen. But with all that, with that commercial success and critical success, and a lot of things that don't count, I still feel prouder of this movie than anything I've ever done.